It's a beautiful morning. I think I'll go outside for a while and just smile.
Hello again. This is Denny Somack. I'm a rock historian, producer, and best-selling author with thousands of interviews that I've conducted over the years. And in order to bring you some of the best, I've created the Rock Podcast with Denny Somack. We're always adding new interviews, and on this episode, it's my conversation with Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, producer, songwriter, a founding member of the Rascals, one of the greatest American rock bands, and now author, Felix Cavaliere. His new autobiography, Memoir of a Rascal, is out and available at all the usual places. Felix talks about his beginnings with Joey Dee and the Starlighters, like when they played in Germany and an up-and-coming new British band opened for them, the Beatles. His amazing run of hits after he co-founded the Rascals, 18 top 40 hits, including 5 top 10, Groovin', Good Lovin', Beautiful Morning, How Can I Be Sure, People Gotta Be Free. You know them all. So here's my conversation with Felix from his home in Nashville. Hey, Felix, how you doing?
Hey, man, how are you?
Okay, my name is Denny Somack, and we do a classic rock podcast.
Excellent.
And this is going to be for two things. One, obviously, we're going to talk about the book and your career and everything. I'm also working, I don't know if you know this, but next year is the 75th anniversary of Atlantic Records. So I've been asked to ask you a few questions about that. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay. All right. So how you doing?
Doing okay, man. Yeah, really hanging in there. We're getting back to work, which is always good. How about yourself? Good?
I'm doing fine. I'm in South Florida, so
Nice.
I'm
just
great.
left there. We just did a couple of shows down there. Yeah.
I know I saw you on the Flower Power cruise a couple of years ago, and I know
there you go.
you're still doing that.
Yeah, I just came off of that cruise again, and
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
this time was the people are just because of COVID, they're ready to go crazy, and
Yeah.
they are going crazy. They're having a blast.
Yeah. So you finally put your book out.
Right.
My first question is going to be, did you do it because you wanted to tell your story or because you wanted to set the record straight?
Exactly. You got
Which one?
Second one.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been telling the story. We did a tour. We did a Broadway show in 2013.
I saw it in Philly.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And prior to that, we were doing press conferences,
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed that everyone had a different answer for the same question.
Right.
And I said, "Wait a second, what is this?" And I've been telling it as a joke ever since. Did Custer win or lose that battle? I don't know. But I thought it was important that it kind of threw me because I said, wait a second, like you can't just let things hang like that. So I started writing this, memoir, so to speak, and then I realized, wow, I've been here for quite a few decades.
Mm-hmm.
Rascals, with all due respect, was only about 5 or 6 years of that time.
Right.
What about the other years? So that's really how it came about.
Now, did you rely completely on your memory, or did you use some help from people?
I think mostly on memory, because what I find is as I read, like, with all due respect, the Wikipedias of the world,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where they get their information, but well, it's not valid. I think you have to be real careful with your online data.
Yeah.
They've had my wife's name wrong for 10 years. I gave
Right.
up. Honey, I didn't do that. That's not me.
I saw 2 different listings for your birth date too. Have you seen that
Yeah,
one?
exactly. Yeah. One makes me younger. I like that one better, but
One says 42 and one says 44.
yeah, it's 42. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So most people obviously know you from the Rascals and
Right.
some other stuff that you've done, which we'll go into. But you started out with Joey Dee. How did that come about?
Well, it came about as a result of working in the Catskill Mountains for a summer.
Mm-hmm.
I took off a summer for the school, and during that period of time, they would have headliners come into the hotel. It was the Raleigh Hotel, and this group came in, Joey Dee and the Starlighters, which was a life changing event because I met not only Joey Dee, but I met the Brigatti family. David, in this case, was a singer with Joey. And then as the summer passed, and I was going to go back to school, I got a phone call because their organ player had quit in Europe on tour, and I got a query: would I like to join them in Frankfurt, Germany?
Mm.
I said, I spoke to my dad, and I said, I'd like to give this a try. What do you think? And he was a very conservative kind of dentist, and he was kind of flat. Wow, why you're going to go? Great. Why don't you go and give it a year? Which I always thought was really wonderful. To think you can make it in a year in the music business, that's really great.
Now, what year are we talking about here?
We're talking about 1964.
Okay.
And 63, 64, I think it was
So-
probably the end. I've got to check that because the only reason I have as a date is that, and this is all in the book, by the way,
mhm. Right.
when I showed up in Europe, they were working in a club in both in Germany and in Sweden, and the group that was opening for him was called the Beatles. So I walked in on that phenomenon
Hmm.
before they came to the United States, which I believe was 64. I think they did the Ed Sullivan Show.
Right.
So no one knew about them in the States until that Ed Sullivan. But I witnessed that hysteria phenomenon in Germany.
What was that like? What did you think of them?
Well, first of all, you walk into a place where everybody's screaming top of their lungs and hysterical, and I'm not talking about yay. I'm talking about like insanity. So I didn't know what was going on. And guys with long hair. I never saw guys with long hair. That was new. Uh, and then from a musical point of view, I was at a period of my life where I was really making a decision between going back to pre med or jumping into this insane world of music, and I listened to them. What I could hear. You can't hear too much. And I said, wow, they sound like a singing group. I wasn't really that crazy about the musicianship there. They're okay. Uh, they uh, would do American music, which I consider like R&B, Chuck Berry, et cetera, et cetera. And frankly, they were okay. They were not like like wow. But when they had the new Beatle music, which was unheard of at the time. Prior to that, people did not write their own songs. I mean, Chuck Berry was an exception, Buddy Holly was an exception. Uh, I said, wow, what's that? I'm talking about like like I think you can hear this. I said, what is that, man? Wow, pretty cool. I mean, like wow, and of course everybody's going bananas. So it was really interesting because I really made a decision. I said, yeah, I could do this.
Now, Joey had a couple of hits. Was Who was the headliner?
He was Joey.
Okay.
Joey was an established entity at that point.
Right.
With the peppermint twist, and he had "What Kind of Love Is This?" and he,
Hmm.
you know, but I mean, my God, it was just how do you follow that? I mean, it's like
Did
it was amazing. It was really amazing, and it made quite an impression on me because it was a total life change, a career change.
right? Did you get to meet him at the time?
We met them over the years many times.
Right.
I mean, I met them all. I had a sort of a relationship with George Harrison because we have similar, beliefs as far as
Hmm.
like yoga and that
Right.
world. I toured with Ringo. I did his all-star band. Paul, I've met a few times, and like John, as much as anyone could know John, John was a little bit, to himself, and he had this habit. He squinted, when he saw you because he couldn't see you, so you thought he didn't like you.
Okay. So you come back from Europe,
Right.
and then what happens?
Well, I came back from Europe and I stayed with Joey for a while on tour because he was now doing the United States, and that was fascinating because Joey did not fly. He was on the flight prior to Buddy Holly and Big Bopper going down, and
Hmm.
the one I think it also got Ricky Nelson. So he wouldn't fly. So I was able to see, the United States by train or by car, and Europe as well. So I really, really enjoyed that because I was a young guy, I was a young kid. I was just like, I mean, his road manager used to say, "Look, you got to keep your mouth closed because they're gonna think it's an ashtray." I'm going, all the time. I'm, wow, wow, a new world. I mean, you're an entertainer. You're a sideman in a band. There's no pressure on you as a sideman. You just go along. You don't have to worry about ticket sales or anything. I loved it. You know, and and then I don't know, something changed, and I went to New York. I took a job out in Las Vegas because we had this very interesting thing in those days, which I'm sure you remember, called the draft, which was, really, you couldn't really establish yourself in any kind of business or career until you got that at least out of the way in one way or another.
Number 299.
Really? Well, I was in the early part of that. I'm probably a little older than you, and they
Yeah.
were a little bit more selective in those days. And they said, "Nah, this is not a fighter. I don't think this guy's going to really help us out. We'll call you if there's a nuclear event. We'll call you." But so when that happened, I was able to start the group because I really felt like, okay, not now I can start something and feel free that I can at least make it or not break it on my merits.
So you spent a lot of time playing in Long Island, and you were in the New York scene. And I know you talk about some of the people that you met and everything. One of them in particular was Hendrix. Tell me about that.
Well, Jimmy was also part of that scene, in New York for many years with the Isley Brothers and a few other groups. And yeah, I mean, he was just so interesting, because he was very shy, and he was very tall. And, in those days, like when you did a solo, like the old days with the saxophones coming to the front microphone and playing, he would come to the front of the band he was with and
Mhm.
just blow like, "Oh my God, like what is this? This is amazing!" And then he'd go right back. He's very shy, you know. So I got to know him a little bit then, and then he went off to Europe, and that whole episode out there is historic because what happened is he was discovered by the English guitarists and by Chaz Chandler, the bass player for the Animals. Well,
Mhm.
the next time I saw him was he was coming to New York and he was opening for us at Central Park. I believe that was his first New York appearance, and the shy guy was no longer shy. The shy guy was no longer leaning over to not show his height. The shy guy was standing like this with feather in his hat.
Mhm.
And I said, "Man, what happened? What happened?" And he said, "Little brother, I'm going to show you." And he went on that stage, and it was like amazing because what he was doing was showing, you know, the new world that he was in, the new Jimmy. And it was mind blowing because he was just tearing it up, man. I mean, like on fire, really on fire. It was a little bit scary for some of them rascal audiences, let me tell you, because he just was dynamic. I mean, I don't
Mm.
have to tell you that because you all know that now, but we didn't know that in those days. So anyway, I had a little bit of a relationship with him, and I'm proud to say he was a friend, and he was a charming. He was a really nice man. And people don't realize that that image on stage was not Jimmy. Jimmy was a doll.
Now, you mentioned that he gave you his watch.
Yeah, he was just a giving kind of guy. I mean, not to be psychological about it, but I know he wanted, like most artists, he wanted to be liked and accepted. And yeah, I understand he had a pretty bad childhood or a pretty rough childhood. So he would, if you gave a compliment to him, I said, "Man, that's nice." And he said, "Yeah, well, here, man." I said, "What do you mean here?" "No, I just said it's nice." He said, "No, no, you got to have this, man. That's part of my religion." Yeah, he was just a good guy, a real good guy, maybe a little bit too good.
Hmm. Okay. So let's just move forward a little bit. How did you meet Sid Bernstein, and what kind of influence did that have on you
Oh,
and the
tremendous
band?
business wise. I mean, it changed us from a $200 group to $1,000 group instantly. You know what I mean? Because basically, what happened is we were offered a job in the Hamptons, And for people who know the Hamptons now, it's like the place for this, hoi polloi to go, and all of the record execs and all of the movie stars and all the people that can afford that go out there for the summer. Well, it's been like that for years. So I knew when we were offered that job, it was a place called the Barge, that if we were going to get discovered, this is where we are going to get discovered. And that's what happened. A gentleman came in by the name of Walter Hyman, who was a businessman. He was a textile magnate, and he saw us, and he realized, I got a friend named Sid Bernstein. Let me bring him in here. And Sid came in, and so we had a management contract offered to us, and we had two fine managers at the time, Walter and Sid, Wall Sid Management. They immediately changed our life, doubled our salary in this place that we were playing, and brought in the record companies. It was a life changing event again. So, life changing event after life changing event is wonderful.
Now, for those that don't know, Sid Bernstein is the promoter who brought the Beatles to America, promoted a lot of other people, worked with many, many people, passed away a few years ago, but he was a character.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew him, but
I knew him. Yeah.
He was a character. And, he not only brought us, I mean, he brought, like, for example, he was the first to bring martial arts to Madison Square Garden. He brought karate and taekwondo before anybody really knew what that was. He also brought Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky, chess, championship. He could see what people were going to like, and he would buy it, and he would bring it in. Promote it is the right word, not buy.
Right. Okay. So whose idea was it to wear the costumes?
Oh, Jesus, that's another thing, man. Well, in those days, the clubs were 21 and over, and they demanded a suit and tie. You had to have a jacket and tie, which was so cumbersome. It was impossible. So I'm not sure of the history of that. I give Dino credit for it, but he doesn't want it. They came up with an outfit. There was this fella from Jersey. Why don't you wear knickers and a shirt? And the club owner said, "Well, I like it, but put a tie on." So we had to end up with a tie anyway. You know what I'm saying? Which you're singing. You got this, but it's just a way to kind of get seen. And to get out of those suits.
So do you think Angus Young was a fan? Is that where he got it from?
I don't know. I mean, like I say, I think that's a very English and, of course, Australian look, the knickers and, all that. But I hope so.
So you had a pretty nice run of hits.
Yes.
The first, Ain't Gonna Eat Up My Heart Anymore? Was that the first one? Okay.
That started the process, yes.
Right. And then you started writing your own stuff. So obviously, I want to ask you about a couple of the different songs. How about You Better Run?
Well, You Better Run was written prior to, the Rascals. It was had to do with a certain relationship that I was having that was not too pleasant. So actually, I Better Run, I should have called it, But, the clubs at that time did not want or allow personal songs, original songs. They wanted covers. That's all they wanted. Basically, what they were interested in was you coming to the club, dancing and drinking, and they could care less about any kind of originality. So I would have to go out of my way to find songs that were actually covers, that were actually records, which is how I found Good Lovin', and I found Mustang Sally. I had to literally go to a record store and purchase it so that I could prove to the proprietor that it was not an original, but it may not have been a hit, but it was still a cover. So that really helped with like a first number one record, which was Good Lovin'.
It's a Beautiful Morning.
Well, as we started to progress as writers, and we started to get acceptance as writers, which is a really wonderful, wonderful thing that happened to us. The Times, basically we just came off of a really hit record, Groove in there. We captured the market and we were in Hawaii, and I was in love, and everything was kind of really nice. And I said, wow, how about if we write a song basically that makes everybody feel like this whenever they hear it? And that was written in Oahu, as a matter of fact. So, Beautiful Morning.
Okay, People Got to Be Free, which was that like one of your biggest?
Yeah, it was one of our biggest, and it's one of our most lasting, as well as Beautiful Morning. They're both are. I was working. We were working for Robert Kennedy campaign. I was very avid follower of. We wanted to change. I wanted to change. I think we're still looking for a change here, many years later. But I really felt that he uh, embodied such a change. And I was seeing a woman at the time who was actually present at that assassination, that horrible assassination, when he actually won a primary, and at the celebration he got assassinated. It just it triggered something in me because as you know, when people work for a campaign then or now, they're pretty avid, they're pretty enthusiastic, and all of a sudden just to be taken like that, uh, and it was right after Martin Luther King, and it just it made me want to write this song and say, look, we've got to make a statement. Why? Because I think we should all have to make a statement at some point in time, just to let people know where you're at.
So what was that like? I mean, you have one hit after another. I mean, you had a greatest hits album out almost instantly. How did that feel?
Magic, very thankful, blessed. It was a joyous part of my life. I mean, because I mean, look, you're actually going into a studio, which was state of the art at that time. We at Atlantic had the only 8 track, except for Les Paul. Everybody else was 4 track. You can imagine the Beatles making all that music on 4 tracks. Shows you the talent
Hmm.
that was in the room in terms of engineers. You know, uh, 4 tracks. You think of now we have unlimited tracks, but it's hard to even explain the joy that you have when you write something, you record something, people like it, they buy it, and it's a hit. It's just it's wonderful, which is another one of my songs. I mean, I just thought it was amazing, and for anybody to not like that in terms of like group members was shocking to me because most of our peers were over there getting shot at.
Hmm.
You know.
So that, of course, gets you on the Ed Sullivan Show, which was everybody's dream at the time. What did that do for you? What do you remember about that?
Well, I remember a lot of things about that. This was basically in those days that was the outlet to the masses. Because we had a few television programs that were musically oriented, Hullabaloo and Shindig, and then there was the local ones like Clay Cole. Every municipality had an outlet, but Ed Sullivan was the big one. If you got on that show, you were seen, all over the United States, which you needed to do to have a hit record. Um, there's a lot to be said about that Ed Sullivan Show. It was a 7-day rehearsed event. We worked for 7 days. We got up in the morning at 7 a.m., went there to work, and on Saturday night he had a full concert in front of an audience with no television. And then the 8th day, I'm sorry, the 7th day, he rested, because we did the live show, and it was so chaotic because it was live. And what I mean by that is that after all that work, we're on stage for what, 2 minutes, two and a half, maybe. We used to doing 2-hour shows, and all that energy is just pent up, and you did it 2 minutes, and then you're so Eddie, I was living with him at the time, used to come back and wreck our apartment. you know.
What did you meet Ed?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what was he like?
He's kind of stoic.
Yeah.
Kind of
Most people tell me though they do the Ed Sullivan Show, and the next day they walk on the street and everybody knows him.
well, yeah. That's because he was huge. But
Yeah.
as an individual, he was from another generation, and we could tell that he really was not enamored with the rock and roll people. I had a run in with his staff because after our 6th appearance, it was time for us to get a good dressing room. You know what I mean? And he would give it to the old timers, the puppets. you know.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, you know what, man? You want us here, man? Seriously, you got to treat us a little better, with all due respect. But I thank him and his staff and his, for putting us up there. But enough already.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So you guys did something when you were at the height of your career.
Yeah.
that some people say was sort of a negative. I mean, as far as your career, that's when you announced you wanted to have African American groups as your opening act, or you weren't going to play.
Yeah.
What happened when you did that?
Well, first of all, to explain the thought process behind it, I mean, it's twofold. I mean, once, as I say in my book, I've been the minority all my life. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we moved into a town where Italians were like Italians. I mean, we're not Italians. We don't come from Italy. So I felt that prejudice, for want of a better word, as a boy. It stuck with me my whole life. It's still here. Second of all, we were on a label which was Atlantic. We were the first white act on the black and red label. Our record sales, our audiences were mixed. They were half black and half white. And not only did I appreciate that, but I wanted to cater to that. So one day we were doing a show and there was a group opening up for us who was a black act, but was not a black act, was a pop act. I think it was called Young Holt Trio or Young
Mm-hmm.
Holt Unlimited. And they came back to me and they said, Felix, thank you so much for having us. We don't get a chance to play in front of white audiences. And I said, you know what, man? We don't get a chance to play in front of black audiences. Why don't we do this?
Mm.
Now, I still don't know why don't we do this because the radio stations were mixed at that time before they started to become really like demographically oriented.
Mm-hmm.
We had, Motown and we had folk music. We had Peter, Paul, and Mary. We had, like Johnny Mathis. We had, oh, but you can't do it live? Why? Well, I found out why. It caused a lot of difficulty. You just, if you're thinking from a business standpoint, obviously, you're not. I wasn't.
So, was there some blowback because of
Yes.
that? I mean, what happened?
Exactly that. Like you're not coming here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so sick because you get into philosophy, we get into music. I mean, what was music before? I mean, classical music. The only drums that I'm aware of are war drums. You know what I mean? You're either marching, or it's thunder. It could be
Right.
thunder, right? But our music come from Africa was all rhythm. So when you put the two together, you've got popular music. Take the rhythm out of popular music, it stinks.
Mm.
What I mean? For the most part, nobody's going to get up and dance to harp, you know?
Right.
So why are you like denying the fact of life that, like it's a mix? It's, and I just kind of still scratch my head and say, still don't get it? You don't get it? So anyway, it was just a heartfelt thing. And, like I say, from a business point of view, I don't know, it hurt us, you know, but it also helped us because here we are 45, 50 years after talking
Right.
about it.
Right. And you're talking about your life story. So,
And I'm
all right.
proud to
So,
be part of that. Let me tell you. Yes.
okay. So, you have this massive run on Atlantic, and then you switch over to Columbia, and Eddie and Gene leave. What's the story there?
Well, Eddie had left twice before that, I think. He just didn't want to do it anymore. He wasn't happy with the whole situation, and Atlantic kind of picked up on that. And, they didn't really want the group. They wanted me. And me being the socialist that I was, I said, no, how can I possibly leave my band? Oh, my God, And then Eddie quit. He left. And then Gene, it was a sad situation because of the way that happened. But Dino said, well, we want to change everything. I said, oh, yeah, what do you mean by that? Well, and so Gene kind of left. Now we had a contract with a new label, Columbia, and we didn't have a band, so I had to find a band. I found an excellent band, and I stepped out, really stretched out, maybe a little too much, from the AM to the FM, and it worked in other countries, like in Japan, it worked very well. In Canada, it worked very well. United States, they said, well, it's not the Rascals. It's not really the Rascals. Well, who is it? The Rolling Stones? Well, it was the Rascals. It was the new Rascals or whatever you want to call it. Those periods of time, they still don't make sense to me. Why somebody would leave, a group with a very lucrative contract on the table.
Mm-hmm. So
Success.
you did what? 4 albums for Columbia?
I did 2 albums with the so-called Rascal group, and then I went on and did 2 albums with Epic as a solo artist. Yes.
Right. Okay. So let's fast forward. You split up what, the end of the 70s for good, or
Oh no, 72 we split up.
72 you split up?
That
Okay.
was it. Yeah.
All right. So let's fast forward to one of the highlights. Tell me about your meeting with Steve Van Zandt and your induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, one was before the other.
Right.
One had something to do with the other. You see, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like most Hall of Fames, they have a nominating committee. And what happens is basically if you're nominated, then you go. It gets a vote, and the vote is done by all of us who are actually inductees. But it's the nominating process which is really the test.
Mhm.
And if you don't get nominated, obviously you can't get voted in. And I know people who, I'll tell you a great story. Chubby Checker's one that, he's still angry. He's not in. And another story I have is Eddie Money, rest his soul. Eddie used to call me up before he passed. He said, Felix, you got to get me into the Hall of Fame. My kids don't think I'm anything. I said, no, they love you, man. Come on. What are you talking about? He says, no, seriously, man. What can I do? Sometimes I feel like the Pete Rose of rock and roll, you know, because evidently he was not that good to the press. I don't know. So Steve Vizant was very, very, very helpful in getting us nominated because I guess he's part of the committee. So was Frankie Valli. So was Phil Spector. So was Dion DiMucci. We had a lot of friends there. We got nominated. We got in, and as a result of that, it's a great event. There was no question about it. And years later, we heard from Steve. Uh, he wanted. It started off with a thing that Bruce and he would have been doing for years, the Kristen Carr cancer
Sure.
program.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, one of my daughters had cancer at that time, so it was very important for me to do that. And that was a harbinger of like, well, let's try something else with the Rascal group, the original guys. Um, I have mixed emotions about it because, like as I say, it ended more than once. That means actually had 2 endings. You know what I mean? One was bad enough, but 2 was rough. But it was fun. It was good, and a lot of good things came out of that for both parties.
So when he proposed the Once Upon a Dream tour, which is what we're talking about, which I did see also in
Uh-huh.
Philadelphia, what I mean, people have been trying to get the 4 of you together. You're one of the few groups where all the members are still around. So what did he have that nobody else was able to do?
Perseverance. He wouldn't give up.
Did you say no the first few times?
Yeah, I really did because like I say, uh, it's difficult, and I didn't put these feelings. I didn't really express them in the book. I mean, when you get a divorce, it's not the most pleasant experience in the world. And unfortunately, like it kind of leaves a little bit of a scar. Say, well, should I do this again? I mean, it's people who go back to their relationships. Usually, those relationships don't work. And they can blame whatever, whoever, however you want, but why, pick at a scab? So I really didn't want to do it. Um, uh, and I was persuaded to do it, and I think with all due respect, uh, when you look at it from a musical point of view, we'll just stay with that rather than the emotional.
Hmm.
I was very structured. I was very kind of like you know in a bind as far as when you do a show like that, it's all timed. It's all everything is by rote. I left classical music primarily because of that. I couldn't create. And I'm spontaneous when I'm on stage now. I have a band that I kind of tempt them with where's he going now. You know what I'm saying? And they follow me. They go where I go, and the audience loves it. So I felt really hampered. In that.
So let me ask you this. If I were to talk to the other 3 guys, am I going to get 4 different stories?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, that's. If you tell someone a joke, try to hear that joke back 4 years from now, and watch what happens.
So it's going to take an outsider to do a biography on the entire group, maybe to get the real story, or is
And
that
I'll
still
pray. I'll pray for him, right, or her. Yeah, no, I mean, there's no real story. I mean, it's each person's individual story of what happened and how it went, you know. But I mean, you know, you really have to enjoy yourself when you work at my age. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
I don't need to do all this. I mean, look at Ringo. I mean, Ringo doesn't need to ever sing a song in his life, but he does because he has a blast.
What was that like being on the Ringo tour?
Ah, it was wild, man. First of all, I
Did
made
he remember you from Joey D?
no, no, he didn't even
Did
see
you
it.
tell him about it?
You know, I don't know. I don't know if we did. You know, I don't know because you know I met Mark Farner there, Randy Bachman there, Billy Preston, rest his soul, John Entwistle there, his wonderful family, Zach on the drums, and his wonderful wife, Barb. It, it, it was a a pleasure working with Ringo because, like I say, all of the people that are involved in that endeavor, in that event, which he still does, they love to play.
Hmm. So I know that you've worked with other people, you've produced other people. And I just want to touch on a couple of those. What was Laura Nyro like, and how did that come about?
It came about as a result of David Geffen, who was managing her at the time, who introduced me to her. And his very words were, "How would you like to meet the most impossible person you've ever been around in the studio?" And it turned out to be the exact opposite. I mean, I just fell in love with her and her music. Matter of fact, I'm doing a thing for her in her legacy in May. I believe there's a Broadway show that's coming out that's
Hmm.
called Eli's Coming. She was probably the most pure artist I've ever met in my life. I mean, in that you know she had a vision or visions every time she wrote a song, and she wanted that vision represented on vinyl at in those days, and she didn't let anybody stand in her way to get that. So it was our job, you know, as producers, to enhance that. And I used to tell her all the time, you know, some of us would like to make money on these things, you know, but not her. She just wanted to have that art.
Who were some of the other people that you produced?
Well, I produced people, Jimmy Spheris.
Right, that's right.
I produced a group called Deadly Nightshade, which was
Hmm.
interesting. Uh, I produced a lot of people whose name you don't know because it didn't make that level. But I really enjoy producing. I really like it, you know.
How did you get connected to Maggie Bell?
Through Atlantic, our attorney was the representative of Zeppelin, and that was she was on their label Swan Song, and Maggie was something else, man. Yes, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed everything I do, man. Like I say, and if I don't, I leave.
Do you remember the session for Here, There, and Everywhere?
Yes, with Luther Vandross, of course I do. Yeah.
And wasn't there a guy playing drums for the last time on that session?
Yes, John Bonham. Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, it came about again as a result of being on the Swan Song label, and John and uh, I guess he was part of the. I guess Maggie and they knew each other, and so
Yeah.
he came in, and he was a really interesting guy, you know, because I think people should realize that uh, the tax structure in England was so severe that uh, a lot of the groups had to live out of the country for over 6 months of the year. And like I read a story once where he couldn't even go home for a child being born, and I think it really took a toll on him.
Hmm.
Because you're away from your family because of monetary reasons, and money is it the root of all evil? I tell you, it could be because I think it really destroyed him. In terms of like his personal life.
So did you just do that one track or did you do a whole album with her?
We did a whole album. We did a whole album, and the concept that I had was I was going to write her one song, which I did, and the rest we were going to do all fantastic songs redone.
Hmm.
One was here, there, and everywhere. And the good fortune I had on that is I was able to hire Luther Vandross, who at that time was doing backgrounds and commercials for the United States Army, you know, and he was given, complete artistic control over the backgrounds, and they were magnificent. And later he thanked me for that because it opened up a whole new door for him just to come in and arrange people's vocals,
Hmm.
background. He was great, fantastic,
Did that
fantastic.
album ever come out?
It did. It
It
did.
did.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it did or what it didn't do because Swan Song, I don't know if it was a tax write-off or what it was, but they had some good things on there. I think they had Bad Company on there, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
they did. They did. Okay. All right. So let's, right now you're out, you're touring still with your own version of the Rascals. You've got your autobiography out. You got a new album coming now and then. Tell me about that.
Well, basically, what I tried to do is take 5 songs that influenced me, re-record them, and then write 5 new ones to kind of go along with that trend.
Hmm.
And so, I think if people like this, I'd really like to continue to do this because, we took 5 fantastic songs. We did Slip Away, we did Higher and Higher, we did Spanish Harlem. When we did some songs that people might not know. There's a Ray Charles song called Mary Ann. And there's another song that there's a group called Bobby Moore, which was called Searching for My Baby. And God, I mean, I had a ball doing this. And then the
Yeah.
COVID kind of hit during that period of time, so we were able to continue it online.
Now you live in Nashville. Did you record it there?
Yes.
And any guests on there, or just your usual
No,
band?
it's
Or
just my usual band. We were kind of locked down. So as far as getting any guests, they would have to been online as well. And basically, it was just a home production. It was not like anything like with big monetary people around it or behind it. So we'll see what happens. If people like this, I'd really like to do it again.
okay, great. Now I want to ask you some questions. As I mentioned, it's the 75th anniversary of
Sure.
Atlantic next year, and I know you made a couple of references, but what was it like when you got signed by Atlantic? They didn't have a white rock band then, right?
I know. Yeah. To me, I'm walking around halls where every one of my record collection either recorded or lived. Uh, it was uh, it was amazingly, fantastically wonderful. I mean, like I say, Sam and Dave is over there. Otis Redding is over here. Ray Charles had been here. John Coltrane was in this room. Miles Davis. I mean, I'm looking at this place like, are you kidding me, man? Where am I? You're in
So did you
Atlantic Records.
record in the Atlantic studios
We did.
at the time, the same
We had
place where Cream did Disraeli Gears? And
we had free studio time, man. And let me tell you, people can say what they want. It's like when we were talking about the Once Upon a Dream. There's good and there's bad and everything. A lot of people talk about Atlantic, but let me tell you something. That was magic working there.
how important was it? You
Magic.
work with Arif, right?
Reef and Tom Dowd.
How important were those two guys?
Well, it's immeasurable. I mean, it's like the Beatles with George Martin. It's immeasurable. First of all, the knowledge that I gained from Arif about how to be a producer, how to be a gentleman, how to deal with 3 or 4 crazy young guys in the studio that, like Tom used to say to us, when you get around the music desk, which they built that music desk. Atlantic built that board. There was no boards. He created the faders that went up and down instead of the pots that you turn. Anyway, you're around giants, absolute giants. And, like, for example, the group would say to him, "Oh, I can't hear my guitar." And, I'm sure that he must have heard that like 10,000 times. And he would say, "You see that meter? You see that red dot? If you go up, somebody goes down." you know, the knowledge that, we were able to gain from him. And
Yeah.
then Arif was just a gem. I mean, he was like I call him like my musical, encyclopedia. I mean, like basically, you have an idea. What is it? Is it French? Is it African? Is it you name it? I can do it because he can arrange any thought you had into strings, horns, whatever. A joy working with him.
Okay. So what was Amit like?
Well, Ahmed was a real character. I mean, he was obviously a very astute businessman, and you know their story. I mean, their story is unique, and anybody who does not know the Atlantic story should look it up. There's a wonderful volume out, of book out. I mean, their anthologies of music is like the history of American music. Uh, he was a very interesting guy in terms of the fact that a lot of people don't know he was also a songwriter. I mean, he had to change his name and but he wrote, "Take a letter, Maria, send it to my wife." I mean, he and his brother Neshui, uh, uh, they 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 made a label that changed the musical world. He was very, very wild child, I must say.
Hmm.
Uh, I just can never thank those guys enough. And then Jerry Wexler, of course, who was kind of like the person that I would have to meet with every time I had to have an argument about, what record we should release. I really admired those guys and people, and I'm thankful to God that they gave us the opportunity to make music on their label.
So, what was it like when Amit first came to see you play?
Well, I can't remember him actually coming to see us play, but I remember him sending Tom out and the hierarchy. But Amit was man. I mean, I have so many stories about Amit that like I say,
Well, feel free to tell us one or two. We got an anniversary coming up. They're making a movie of his life.
Oh, I did not know. He was a wild child, man. Because I mean, I have stories about him and his peers. I'll tell you one that was told to me. One night, he was to be given an honorary award at one of the many events that he was invited to in New York City, and I understand that some of his friends came to his apartment and tied him to his chair. So he couldn't get there. Oh my God. Those guys, those people, they spun at a very, very high level, man. There's no way I could keep up with them. And I just remember, like, for example, Otis Redding calling him omelet. You know,
Right.
omelet. You know, you know, what can I say? I mean, the admiration that I have for their label and their expertise and the people that they brought to the public. That one story, like for example, was Bobby Blue Bland. They always wanted Bobby Blue Bland, and his manager would never release him from his contract. A lot of people don't know Bobby Blue Bland, but let me tell you something. If he had been allowed on Atlantic, everybody would have known about it. Look what they did with Wilson Pickett, and with Solomon Burke, and with King Curtis. I mean, maybe people don't know those names, but you want to hear some music, man? Look up these names.
Hmm. Okay. Well, this has been great. I want to just ask you a couple other things. First of all, you've been doing or you've done a couple of music infomercials. How do you like doing that?
Well, they pay well.
Right?
And for the most part, they're kind of easy to do. You meet new people. The gentleman who did the Flower Power cruise is the gentleman
Alan
who,
Rubens.
yeah, he got
He's a
me
friend of
on.
mine. Yeah.
Well, he's a mention and a half, so you
Hmm.
can tell him thank you because he got me into most of those.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a question. Do you remember working on an infomercial in the 90s with Don Kirshner and Davy Jones?
Yes,
I
yes.
produced that.
Oh, did you? Wow.
So when people say to you, why you can tell them, that was the first music infomercial.
Was it? That was an interesting. I never knew that. That's great. Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, I want to wish you a lot of luck. I
Thank.
appreciate you taking the time. And when you see Alan Rubens again, you tell him you made the first music infomercial.
I will.
All right, Felix. Look, lots of luck.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Good luck with the new album. Good luck with the book.
Hey, Kenny. Thank you.
Always a great show when you're out there. I want to remind you that this is The Rock Podcast with Denny Somack, and you can contact me through the website, therockpodcast.com. So that's it for this episode. Tell your friends, keep in touch. Goodbye for now.